We're used to thinking about how hard is this going to be for me, multiplying that by my hourly rate. Here's your estimate. It's turning it around to what's it worth to them, come up with some prices that are going to make sense, and then figure out, well, what should I do for these prices?
Hey, welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. I'm your host, Will Bachman. Unleashed is produced by Umbrex, the first global community connecting top-tier independent management consultants with one another. We just heard from today's guest, Jonathan Stark, who is on a mission to rid the world of hourly billing. He's the author of Hourly Billing is Nuts. If you visit his website, jonathanstark.com, you can sign up for a free email-based course titled Value Pricing Bootcamp. Jonathan is also the co-host of a podcast, The Business of Authority. They've got over 100 episodes published, and they describe their show as being for independent professionals who want to go from 6 figures to 7 while increasing their impact on the world. Hello, Jonathan. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Jonathan, let's start. Tell me about Jonathan's card.
Oh, okay. That was back in, I think it was 2011.
Okay.
And what happened was I was doing mobile strategy consulting for a chain in the U.S., a restaurant chain, and they didn't, back then there wasn't, it was uncommon to be paying for things with your phone. So I was doing some research for them, and at the time, the only application that really allowed you to pay at the point of sale was the Starbucks app. And since I was a mobile guy, I had lots of phones, and I had Android phones and iOS phones. And at that time, if you can believe it or not, Starbucks only had an iOS application. There was no Android app yet. And the way that it worked was you would go up to the cash register, and you just display a barcode on the screen of the application, and they would scan it, and it would check you out. So it was kind of like a prepaid card with a barcode on your phone.
Yeah, it's kind of how it works today. I mean, I still use it.
So it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it still works the same way. And I was like, it's annoying that they don't have an Android app, because, if I had my Android phone that day, I would want to, I was going to Starbucks all the time. And I thought, I assume that this barcode changes every time, but maybe it's just a static photo. So I took a screenshot and I emailed it to myself and opened it on my other phone. And sure enough, I just held up the picture to the scanner. I could pay with a picture. And that blew my mind. It sounds kind of silly now, but at the time it was huge. So I blogged about it, and I said, I put $50 on the card, and I blogged about it, and I said, hey, if anybody wants to download this picture onto their phone, your next Starbucks is on me. And I didn't have a lot of people reading my blog, but a few people immediately got up from their desks and went and did that.
That's one way to get more readers.
Yeah, pay them.
Free coffee.
Right. So, maybe 15 minutes later, people were messaging me on Twitter and saying, hey, there's no money on that card. And I was like, yeah, there is. I just put $50 on it. And so something like 20 people had just gone and bought a whole bunch of coffee in minutes within me posting that. So I felt bad, because now all these people are standing in Starbucks and I stiffed them. So I put $50 more on it, and boom, it went immediately. And then I put 50 more on it, and I was like, okay, this is ridiculous.
It's going to get expensive after a while.
Right. So fast forward, a little bit, I figured out, one of my friends actually figured out that you could use the barcode to put money on the card. And that's when the light bulb moment happened for me. And I put up a little microsite that said, hey, let's do a pay it forward thing. I can't afford to keep buying the internet coffee, but maybe the internet can buy the internet a coffee.
Okay.
And so I put up a little instruction guide for how to download the photo and how to put money on it or take money off of it. And it just got picked up in the mainstream press, and it went crazy. It was unreal. For a week, I think, before Starbucks eventually had to shut it down, something like $25,000 went through the card in 5 days. I was getting interviewed by MSNBC, and it was on the front page of CNN.com. It was a whirlwind.
Wow. What did that whole whirlwind experience teach you?
It taught me that it's if you do something remarkable, it's not unlikely that it's going to go viral. So at the time, there was a lot of conversation about making things go viral and guerrilla marketing and that sort of thing. And I had been, my background when I was, going to college, I went to music school, and I had always been in a band, and it was really hard to get any attention for the band or get people to come to the shows. And when I did the Jonathan's card thing, I was like, oh, well, if you do something newsworthy, the news will talk about it. It is just that I hadn't done anything newsworthy in pretty much in my entire life up until that point. So I was like, that was a kind of an eye opener for me. It's not about, in terms of getting PR, I think it's not about knowing the ins and outs of how things work and having connections and all that stuff. It's like, just do something newsworthy and the people are going to find you. I mean, I had to take a week off of work. I was just constantly being interviewed.
And it's like, do something newsworthy. And if I could put in my 2 cents, it feels like it's almost like it seems to me that you didn't start out intending to do something newsworthy, but it was kind of what Seth Godin talks about, which is just kind of poke the box, just try something. And rather than just debating it, but actually just go out and experiment and try something and just sort of see what happens. And you probably didn't do this expecting to get on MSNBC, but like, oh, I wonder what would happen if I,
not at all.
If I blogged about this and bought people $50 worth of coffee. I wonder what would happen. And you sometimes can't predict newsworthy things, but they're certainly not going to happen if you just sit around not trying things.
Yeah. I mean, here we are 9 years later talking about it.
That's right. Yeah. Internet famous. So let's get a little bit into your current work. So you have a pretty interesting website. If you go to jonathanstark.com, and the link's in the show notes, you get a website that is pretty spare. There's no menu bar. There's no kind of navigation stuff. It just starts with some advice. And tell me a little bit about the thinking behind that design and what you currently do in your practice.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, the website design first, it's kind of, I mean, I don't want to say it's on brand for me, but I'm a very sort of utilitarian, straightforward, tough love kind of person. I don't like a lot of bells and whistles. My background is in web development, so it's kind of ironic that my website looks like a Word document. But I just don't.
But it stands out because it's so minimalist and spare, right? That it actually draws your attention. Like you're like, what's going on with this website? It kind of So it's genius design, I think.
Thanks. I mean, I see it as a service to the reader. Like, do you really want to see a giant picture of my face across the whole top of the thing and the logo of everybody I've ever worked for? That's me talking about me. I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about you. And when you come to my page, if you have, I usually start off with, like you said, a question. I call it a heck yeah question. And if you're going to answer yes to that heck yeah question in the headline, you're in the right place. And if you're not in the right place, then don't waste your time on my site.
And
so
we should say
it's a service to the viewer.
Yeah, and we should say what the question is. Are you caught in the hourly trap? So talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, your audience probably has lots of experience with the billable hour. And I think it's honestly, not to sound too dramatic, but I think it's a cancer on professional services. I think the billable hour is terrible for anybody who's good at their job. It's also bad for your clients. And if you've got folks who've worked at, big consulting firms, I'm sure they can remember things like sitting around a table with 40 people billing out $200 an hour, arguing over what is and isn't in the contract when they're, 50% of the way through a project and only 10% done. So I just think on hourly billing is, it's bad for everyone. It's bad for the projects. And so I'm kind of on a crusade to rid the world of hourly billing.
Yeah. And you run a value pricing bootcamp. So tell me a bit about that service that you provide.
Sure. Value pricing is just one of the ways that I teach people to disconnect time from money. But it seems to be the one that captures people's imagination because it seems so hard to understand. I think it seems a little mystical. People are kind of confused by it. And value pricing really is the exact opposite of what people are used to doing, especially in an hourly basis. But I would say in this space, the most common way to get paid for what you do is a cost plus or time and materials model, where a client comes to you or a prospect comes to you and they say, hey, we hear you're really good at this thing. Bob gave me your name. and we want you to, what's your hourly rate? We want you to work with us. What's your hourly rate? And if you think about it in that way, what you're really thinking about is your costs. So, you talk to them, you get an idea of what you think the scope might be. You put together an estimate of how many hours you think it might take, and you give it to the buyer, and the buyer has to make a purchasing decision based on your estimate, which, is fine if you're good at estimating. But if it turns out that you're going over your estimates a lot, then, you're going to have unhappy clients. And that was the experience I had back in 2006. I was running a boutique development shop, software development. And we billed by the hour, and I was the VP, and I had to try, make sure everybody was getting their hours in. Are you tracking your hours? Did you estimate hours for this new project? How far are we through the estimate? I was just constantly talking about hours, fighting with clients about whether or not something should be billable, and just hours all the time. And I was dissatisfied because I wasn't feeling confidence in my ability to make my customers happy. I wanted to satisfy my clients. So I needed to come up with a way to do that. And I went looking for a way to do that and came across value-based pricing, which was absolutely the answer for projects. And the way that it works is the exact opposite. So instead of at the beginning of a project or the beginning of a sales process, I don't talk to the client about the scope. I don't care about the scope. What I want to know is, what business outcome are they trying to achieve? And through what I call the why conversation, I'd get down to, some desired outcome and a rough idea of what that's worth to them. And then based on the value to them, not the scope to me, I'll come up with prices for a proposal. So I usually give them 3 options in a proposal based on the value, not on the scope. And I'll say, okay, this is probably worth $1 million a year to this company. My contribution will be, some percentage of that. So I'll come up with 3 prices like $10,000, $22,000, $50,000. And then, and only then, do I start thinking about scope, my cost. Because my cost, everyone's cost, anyone listening to this, your cost is your time. So when I look at that, I would say, all right, I've got, here's this client. They value this project probably, it's not an exact science, but it's probably worth, $1 million a year to them, or $100,000 a year to them, or $10,000 a year to them, whatever it is. I'll set some prices that are a fraction of that value, and then I'll come up with a scope that fits within those prices. So I'll say, if I had a budget of $10,000, what could I do for this client to move this needle that they want moved? And that might be advisory, it might be training, it might be something very low labor for me. But if I had a budget of $22,000, maybe I'd do something a little more collaborative. Maybe I would go on site once in a while. Maybe I would do something a little bit more that would require more of my attention. Or if I had $50,000 as my budget, what would I do? So it's the exact opposite of what we're used to doing. We're used to thinking about, how hard is this going to be for me? Multiplying that by my hourly rate. Here's your estimate. It's turning it around to, what's it worth to them? Come up with some prices that are going to make sense, and then figure out, well, what should I do for these prices?
Often, clients have not done the math and actually thought through what the value is to them, as I'm sure you've probably encountered many times.
Yep. Almost never.
Occasionally it'll be, tied to it, like, hey, we want to increase sales by 10% or something. And so the math is kind of easy, but sometimes it's, well, we want a new website, or we want to, develop a new strategy or something, right? So it's a little bit disconnected. So can you give us a concrete example? Sanitized is fine, but give us a real example from a real client experience, either yourself or from one of the consultants that you coach, and walk through how you got to a number from something that's somewhat amorphous like that.
Right. Well, you get it from them, and that's what the why conversation is designed to do. So if someone came to me and said, like you just gave the example, like, oh, we want to, I think you said, redesign the website. Even if, or whatever, if it was something like that, or, we want to do a big rebranding, or we want you to run a strategy retreat for us. If that's the request, then you, in a polite but thorough way, you ask them why. Why do you want to do that? what's the point? Why not do that? That's going to be a big expense. Why would you hire someone expensive like me to do that when you could just do it internally? Why do this now? Why not do this in 6 months? Why not study it? You've known about this for 18 months. How come you haven't done anything about it yet? What changed? So what you're trying to do is, because as you rightly point out, the client a lot of times is way down in the weeds and has not thought tactically, is only thinking tactically and they're sort of taking for granted that there's going to be some business benefit at the end. And what I want to do is interview them to gain the confidence that I actually can help them make their business better than I found it. So if I'm not confident that I can move some needle that is going to satisfy them and put a huge smile on their face, and, they're going to build a statue of me outside of the building, it was such a great investment. I want to find out what that success criteria is going to be before I even decide if I should take on the work. So if they came to me and said something like, "Oh, well, we want our website redesigned, or we want the whole thing rebranded or something," I'd say, why? And if it's not easy. It's not as easy as saying, "Oh, my hourly rate's $200 an hour. This will probably be about 1,000 hours. Yes or no?" That's easy. But it puts you in this hourly trap that you mentioned for my website. If you turn it around the other way and you get good at uncovering the root motivation of what the buyer is hoping to achieve in their business, then you've got something that gives, in my case, would give me the power to satisfy them. So they would say, "Well, the website, it's not converting well." Well, where is it not converting? It's not converting well on desktop or mobile. Mobile was my thing when I was doing tech consulting. So I'd say, "Well, what's the problem with the website?" "Well, it doesn't look good." "Well, is that a big deal?" And they would say, "Well, it's kind of a big deal." And I'd say, "Well, how big a deal?" "Well, it's a big deal because, we've got an e-commerce store, and there are, our cart abandonment rate numbers on mobile are like 95%. On the desktop, it's like 50%. If we could move those numbers even a little bit on mobile, which is an increasing percentage of our traffic, then it would be huge for our bottom line." Now we're getting somewhere. So, like you said, a lot of these things are upstream. A lot of the things that folks listening to this do are upstream, branding, strategy, architecture, process creation. But at some point, the client believes, or they wouldn't be talking to you if they didn't believe that there was something that you could do that was going to help them move some kind of needle. In a B2B sales situation or B2B service situation, the client always thinks there's something you can do to help them. You just want to figure out what needle it is that they're trying to move, and then you can start to get a grip on what it might be worth to them.
How do you coach freelancers who say, "Yeah, this is great. I totally get the concept, makes sense, and I know how to have a wide discussion and so forth. But my clients, if I try doing all that, kind of Jedi mind trick on value pricing, at the end, my clients say, 'Yeah, that's great, but the bids we're getting from other folks are hourly, and we just need to, be able to compare you versus them. So that's all fine. That's all fine and great, but we just need to know, to go to procurement, I just need to know what your hourly rate is. So come on, what is it?'"
Yeah, I would say I don't have one. I would have said that immediately on the first phone call, because you're right. Some organizations, government, higher ed, a lot of time they have policies in place where it does actually require that they get an hourly rate, because that allows them to at least operate under the perhaps delusion that they can compare apples to apples and get, air quotes, the cheapest one, when in fact we know from lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit that these sorts of big projects, especially software like in the space I'm in, they go over. So when you say, "Oh, whatever, Deloitte's hourly rate is a little less than McKinsey's, let's go with Deloitte," that's meaningless. And anyone listening to this is going to know what I mean. But the real problem that you're bringing up there, and if you are working with clients for whom a fixed price would be acceptable, and they can get it through procurement, and you have qualified them before you even go into the why conversation, then the problem that you're pointing out is one of differentiation. They want to compare you apples to apples with, this management consultant, that management consultant. You are a management consultant. We are looking for a management consultant. And if there's nothing that's meaningfully meaningfully different about you to them, it is apples to apples. So the problem there isn't a pricing problem. It's a branding or a marketing problem where you've not differentiated yourself from what they see as their alternatives.
All right. So walk me through, give me kind of a Cliff Notes version of your value pricing boot camp. If someone, attends that, what are some of the highlights of the different exercises and so forth that you walk people through?
Sure. Well, I would point out that it's a free email course. It's not something I charge for. You don't have to fly to Providence where I am or anything like that. It's something that people can just sign up for and get a taste of, because after doing this for years, I know that even when you think you understand it, it takes a long time to change your mindset away from that constant desire to estimate scope during the sales process. It's a real hard habit to break.
Mm-hmm.
So the email course, I think it's a 6 or 7 day course that has lessons that are meant to change the way you think about it, to open your eyes to this mind shift that needs to take place and create light bulb moments around, first I talk a little bit about, what's wrong with hourly billing in the first place and kind of point out a few things that hopefully would be persuasive. And then I talk about the difference between a fixed bid based on time and materials, which is very dangerous for a seller, and a fixed bid based on value pricing, which is not as dangerous for the seller. And I go through, it's mostly, it's less prescriptive and it's more meant to be eye-opening. But I'm illustrating the concepts and trying to explain value pricing in plain English, where that it's exactly what it says. It's the reverse of cost plus. Instead of starting with cost, marking up your cost, presenting that as a price, and hoping that it's less than the value to the client, you do it the other way. Get a sense of the value, then come up with a price, and then pick a scope that's going to make sense for you.
Okay, that's cool. So, and that's that course, I think you can get right there at jonathanstark.com, right? You just put in your email address and it comes right to your inbox.
Yep. Yeah, that's my homepage.
Fantastic. So it's tough for you to make a living with a free email course. What if someone wants some more coaching? Do you work one-on-one with freelancers, or tell me a little bit about your practice?
Yep, I have a variety of products and services that are available. I've written, 1, 2, 3, 4 self-published books. Hourly Billing is Nuts is sort of my manifesto about why hourly billing is so bad. I have another book about, it's called The Freelancer's Roadmap, that gives kind of a step-by-step how-to that's kind of a follow-up to Hourly Billing is Nuts. Hourly Billing is Nuts doesn't really teach you how to do things. It's more about opening your eyes to the issue and the possible solutions. And then The Freelancer's Roadmap is a guide, but I also have group coaching and I do workshops and I do private one-on-one coaching. You can find that all on my site. But I would urge people to sign up for the mailing list, because once they go through the value pricing bootcamp, they'll get a sense for whether or not they think I'm worth paying attention to at all. And if so, I do a daily, you automatically get funneled into my daily broadcast message, which I have been writing every day for 3 or 3.5 years.
Wow, that's amazing. That is quite a commitment to stick with it. And so you have this portfolio of activities, you're writing books, you're doing group coaching and one-on-one. And are you still running kind of the development shop, still in the software world, or mainly focused now on working with freelancers?
Just freelancers and consultants. Yep. I work with a couple of sort of boutique dev shops, but I did spin down all of the mobile strategy consulting I think I took on my last new client 3 years ago, and that tailed off in 2019. So yeah, just all in on my mission to rid the world of hourly billing.
And what sort of freelancers or consultants are you typically working with? What field, what focus do they have?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, because my background is in software, and I've been doing it, I was a software developer / consultant / trainer / speaker for like 15 years. I've written a few books for O'Reilly, so I've got a lot of connections in that space. So it's probably about 50% people who are successful independent software developers, or they run a small firm, but they're doing well, but they know they're in the trap. Like, they've been doing it long enough. They're just like, I seem to be working harder than ever and not getting ahead. kind of frustrating. But in the past couple of years, it's really broadened into also designers, marketers, copywriters, even started to attract some lawyers and accountants, those sorts of things. So it's about half and half software type people and a mix of other folks who are sort of in other knowledge-based professions.
And what have you been doing on the marketing side to just generate awareness, raise your visibility, and to get people to find you?
I just create and share as much content as humanly possible. Every day I wake up thinking, who can I help today? And I try and help my list as much as possible. I get lots of replies every time I send a message, and people ask for help. I try and help them as much as I can.
I don't know much about the world of independent professionals or small boutique shops in the software development world. Tell me a little bit about how do clients find boutique firms or independent software developers? Are there intermediaries in that space, or are there kind of platforms where they connect, or are they going on GitHub and finding someone? Like how are they connecting with clients?
Yeah, the ones that are doing better typically are word of mouth. So they kind of get sporadic word of mouth introductions, which is okay. I mean, it's great. It's great to get referrals and word of mouth, but generally they don't have a system in place to make it predictable. It's very random. That's probably the most common way for folks who are successful. Another way that can be common is if they are a software developer in a particular platform space, like Salesforce or Pi or I don't know, FileMaker or something like that. Then they can get some marketing sort of piggyback off of the platform itself. So Salesforce does have a directory of software developers who might be, in the area of someone searching for a Salesforce consultant. So that's another way. If you sort of have a platform specialty, you can piggyback on the platform itself. They'll have you speak at their conferences and that sort of thing. But toward the sort of lower end of the spectrum, people are hustling for jobs. They are checking job boards. Back in the day, they would be looking for things on Craigslist. That was probably the complete bottom of the barrel. These days, there are marketplaces like Fiverr and TopTal and 99 Designs. And most people, I don't think most buyers are going to GitHub. All that's not a bad idea, to tell you the truth. I think you mentioned GitHub. Mostly that, in my experience, is where a recruiter would go to look for an employee. And there are certainly job boards and marketplaces like that where if people are looking for software developers as employees. But generally for folks who are looking for some kind of freelancer, they're going to ask their friends, do you know a good Rails developer? Or they're going to look on some sort of platform marketplace like, Salesforce.com/partners or something like that. And then after that, it turns into this sort of lower value marketplaces where everyone, it's like your name, your hourly rate, sort by price, pick the cheapest one. So it's not great.
Yeah. Give us some success stories of freelancers that you've coached and kind of what sort of transformation they've seen in their own business.
Sure. I don't want to, this is going to probably come across as braggy, but
well, I asked you to brag, so brag away.
Yeah. I had a coaching student in 2019, he runs a firm at maybe 6 employees or 7 employees. And, we've been working together. We started working together in 2018, and in 2019, he had his best year ever by a long shot, while working fewer hours. In one project he closed, he said it was more than double the highest price project he ever sold, and it was about the same amount of work as the biggest project he had ever done. And that project actually wrapped up at the end of 2019. It was very successful for the client and for his client and for me, from the student. I have other students who credit me with buying them their house, where they increased their prices so much that they get paid cash for a down payment on a house. It's shocking how much of a change it is when you disconnect your time from your money. It's amazing. like basically people are, software developers, but I think all professionals, if you're good, if you've been doing it a while and you can point to results that you've provided, you're almost definitely leaving money on the table. I could give you more examples. I have a copywriter I'm working with who's sending out proposals, that where the top tier option is in the six figures. I mean, it's unheard of.
Very interesting idea. So it's really about changing the mindset, and instead of starting first with the scope and then thinking about the fee, start with the value, come up with some prices, and then figure out, okay, for that price, what could I accomplish?
How can I help?
Yeah. How can I help? Jonathan, we mentioned your website a couple of times, jonathanstark.com. Any other ways that you'd like to put out there for people to find you online?
Sure. I mean, that's definitely the best way if you go to my site. But for folks, obviously, people listening to this, listen to podcasts. I also do a show with a co-host called The Business of Authority, which I think would be super relevant to this particular audience. It's basically about turning yourself from saying things like, I am a management consultant, into I am the fill in the blank. So how are you, what are you the one and only at? And once you're a go-to person like that, once you're an authority in a very specific thing, people are going to come to you. You're not going to have this downward price pressure. The value that is perceived from the buyer is going to be much higher. I mean, anybody that worked at McKinsey knows this. You're paying for, or any of them really. Once you leave and you don't have that brand behind you, it's a whole different can of worms. So if you go to thebusinessofauthority.com, you can listen to, I think we've got 120 episodes or so.
So if you have not been listening, you've got some catching up to do. That sounds like a really relevant show. So we will include that link as well in the show notes. So Jonathan, this has been a fantastic discussion. I encourage people to check out and sign up for your free course. Why not? It's free. And get a taste of what Jonathan's been talking about on this show. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Will.